That was
Okay, and I'll just record it, and we'll just who knows if it'll be anything good worth posting. But I've been having the problem that I try too hard in these conversations, and so I'm gonna not try hard anymore because
no
that got
worries.
exhausting. Not
I
like
kind of
now I don't want to do podcasts anymore, um, because I got
Well,
too
it gets in
tired of
the way
trying
of
too hard.
having the actual conversation sometime, right? What you want to do is have conversations, not host a podcast. Yeah, different
Yeah,
thing.
exactly. So anyway,
yeah. Was there anything you guys have been thinking about rolling around in your head in particular? I mean, I certainly have my list of things, but curious curious if there's
well, let's
anything you
actually, if
guys
we
think.
can, let's take like 30 seconds to just sort of I like so there's a thing that I like doing to arrive here, basically, right? The goal would be to take 30 seconds to do whatever it takes to arrive here. And then in order to do that, I would suggest there's a thing that I've enjoyed for some things like this where you just sort of let your eyes go back and forth between the other participants and yourself in the conversation and just repeat in your mind the phrase "I'm here." So I don't know if that sounds good to you guys. Let's do that.
No, works for me.
All right. It's good to see you guys.
Good to see you, Ken.
Good to be here. Good to be here.
I'm just noticing that the TV is sort of flickering in the background of mine. Is it
Turn it
distracting
on.
you? Okay, let me turn it off.
It's interesting how like that sense of presence, it's really about other people buying into it. Because even in that little exercise, we could kind of create a room that doesn't exist between the three of us just by seeing that we're all buying into that room
Yeah.
being so yeah.
Yeah.
And a slight reminder that you guys are human too, not that I don't know that, but it just it brings it slightly closer, the fact that, you know,
You know, I have thought this many times, but today it sort of struck me again because I had to find the various aspects of my setup here and put it all together. And my wife was watching me do it, and I forget she made some comment about its complexity and parts and stuff. And I said, you really, it is feels very much like in a sci-fi movie. You're building your sort of spaceship to do a time warp, right? Or a portal to jump into another dimension. Like that, it really is what it is. And I think that there is something. I One of the things that I feel that sometimes happens to me is that I'm able to actually move into that dimension in a way that makes it way more real. I don't always know what it is that makes that happen, but those sorts of things, like that exercise that we just did, um, seems to make a big difference of doing that.
I can appreciate that. Definitely. A little pre-check routine, like if you're in the cockpit flipping all the switches, you got the pattern that you do, and then it sets you in that mode,
Yeah,
shuts everything out, streamlines your focus.
Maybe helps you get over the 2-year-old brain, which is a bit different than what we're attempting to do here
yeah,
now.
yes,
Like
yes,
contrast.
yes, absolutely. Well, and, it is in the Matrix. It is the phones, right?
Yeah.
Always like that detail. Anyway, Gabriel had asked what's been tossing around for us. I don't know. You got any things to you?
I do have something, but it's quite big, and I feel like it's quite different than the conversation we might otherwise have. So I'm not quite sure to bring it, but just
How about we each describe like one thing that's been rolling around, and then we sort of find what comes out of that.
go for it or not. Sure.
All right, go for it, Steve.
Um, well, I had like a really dramatic experience where it's kind of like a culmination of many experiences headed towards this direction. But I had this really powerful experience. I don't know if you guys saw the what are they called? The Northern Lights recently. Most of North America could see them. So where I was, you could really see them, and it was awesome.
Wow.
I had quite a powerful experience because I'm, big on space and time, and whenever the cosmos is doing something unique, even through our atmosphere, it connects me to that.
Did you hear any of the hissing and clicking? I'm curious. Did it get that strong?
I didn't hear that, no, no, but we're not too far north, so I think maybe I'm not sure actually. I haven't even heard the hissing and clicking before, but we didn't hear any of that. Yeah,
That's cool though.
yeah, but like for me, it was like this, like it's a lot. It was very moving personal experience.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately, I'll just cut right to the chase because I know you guys will appreciate it. I wouldn't do this with many people, but it's it was a really profound, deep experience that I had. I'll just describe it. It was like I was looking up at the cosmos and seeing like the mirror of the whole universe. Like
Mm.
I was looking at the universe and seeing it for what it is. And like sort of it felt like to me like making eye contact with God and like having a recognition that that was occurring. And it was a tremendously powerful experience. And I kind of asked, I was like, I'm trying to do things the right way and so made a lot of changes in my life and stuff like that, but I'm still suffering in certain ways. So it's basically was just made direct contact and was like, what's going on? Like, what do I need to do here? And it was a really profound message of like, you have everything but gratitude. Um, and
Mm.
when you
Mm.
hear that from that source, like in that deep of a connection, it was, obviously hard to hear, but very moving as well. Because
Mm.
I effectively interpreted it as like you've just forgotten to love me. The God was saying that to me, basically.
Mm.
That mapped everything out and was like, well, I don't see any gaps. What's going on? Why am I not feeling it if I'm seeing it? It was kind of the query that I went out with, and it came back as like, well, you have to love first. So yeah, just a really profound experience, and we can talk more about it. But for me, it's just I can feel I'm still unraveling the impact of that, and Ken, like I go into mapping mode so easily, and I think that is
Yeah.
partly it relates to the thing we talked about with Rebecca recently too, but it's a different side of it.
Yeah.
But
Wow. Wow.
anyway,
Man.
yeah, I didn't know how to intro that because it's
What
so
was the feeling? What was the feeling in your body when you heard that? Like was it I imagine like when I hear you tell that story, the feeling that happens in my body is like a sort of like a thrill that's deeply tinged with regret in a way, but also like excitement or something like that. That's sort of what I felt. Like, is that like, but I don't know. Is that at all what it felt?
A fearful awe that
yeah, yeah,
sitting on the edge of something that might pull you apart entirely.
yeah. Yeah, like when a person says something to you, it can feel like, oh, that was the last puzzle piece I needed to figure something out. It can feel really impactful. But this was like, here's the whole puzzle. You're looking with it too. And this is the piece that's missing. And that
Mm.
piece is the connection between me and you. So it was like there was nothing intellectual about it. It was just so defeating. Like it was beyond that. It was shown to my intellect, but it was so beyond that it wasn't something that was like challenged at all. It was just immediately
Yeah.
like
It was just logos.
yeah, exactly. It was just the entire universe is telling me a message, and I agree with it, and it's not good about me. So it was beautiful and yeah, terrifying. I mean, it was the weight and the light of the universe is what it felt like. I mean, it's
And
You
I
said,
love sorry, go ahead.
oh, well, I just wanted to query one thing. You said, and it was not good. What's the not good part for you?
well, it's recognizing my role in my own suffering.
Mm.
That ultimately like I was pursuing a path that was going to let me see God. Took a long time to get there because of the way I went about it, but I did get there. But I wasn't. It was like the incompleteness, the completeness of my incompleteness is the better way to say it. That's what made me cross. It was like it doesn't matter how much further you go down the road that you're on. It's nothing. You're like getting it completely right. Even if you did that, you would feel nothing if you didn't also do this. That
Kind
was
of the horizontal plane versus the vertical connection there.
exactly. It's like you're just on the wrong dimension. So
Yeah.
fill in the rest of that puzzle all you like. But and you know, we've talked about this, Ken. Like there's a lot of stuff like the nuance. I love it. I think it's super important for changing our institutions and helping the world in many ways. But at the end of the day, didn't used to be that hard to believe in God. You know what I mean? Nowadays we have all these nuanced logical maps that need to be convinced in a trillion ways to let go.
Yeah.
But for me, that was like it's just this switch, man. Just flip. It's just gratitude. That's what it is. And yeah, just really humbling.
Wow.
But
No?
I don't feel like I've been humbled enough, frankly. So I think that was what I needed. Still settling in though. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, if I may relate, mine wasn't quite the sober psychedelic experience of seeing the black and white of space in Technicolor,
Yeah.
but I did just to relate a very recent experience to what you're saying. I had because I'm getting laid off at the end of the month, and I'm still kind of trying to figure out what I'm doing, and no idea, just zero ideas, and a lot of discontentment that I'm trying to navigate as far as what I am doing. And it's like, do I want to keep doing this sort of thing, or is there another opportunity that I could move into? And I have the calculation of I have kids and a family and things to take care of financially. So it's like, as you well know, a difficult space to navigate, and that you realize you have this, as much as you try to be a free thinker, and that's very much the state of being for a lot of people in the corner. They're kind of at the fringe. They're thinking deeper things and odd things, but you're still running the same sort of cultural algorithms in your head. It's like, I need to do this. I need to have this done. I need to have this in order. I need to do it a certain way. This is what's expected of me. And you get, or I certainly do get over focused on those things, and they wear you down and they weigh you down. And then I just had a moment, one of those things where you know what it is, you know what it means to do it, but you just don't do it. And then for half a second you do it, and there's immediate clarity, and it was look to God. And it's like, I don't know where I'm looking, I don't know exactly what I'm looking at, but I know I'm looking to him. And there was just this moment where, in the midst of all that worry and that growing anxiety, it was just like I looked up from that and focused in on that guiding presence, and it just everything immediately fell away, and I relaxed. And just remembering, okay, I need to do that constantly and consistently throughout the day, rather than focusing on the future that is a matter of running a set of predictive mechanisms to try to calculate what's going to happen, which I can never do perfectly, or trust that the path in front of me will make itself plain in the proper time. Really letting go of that control, that intellectual control of trying to predict outcomes based on a set of needs that have been dictated to me by cultural norms and my own neuroses. So
can you first of all, this is amazing that like a real embodied, experience of faith and trust in a deeply existential moment is like, wow. Thank you for sharing this, first of all. And second of all, I have a question. You said something about when you described the movement that made that alignment happen, can you describe that movement again? You said something like, you know how it is when you kind of know what it would mean to do something, and then you just sort of try to do it, and then it happens, or something like that. Can you?
It's kind of the way I would map it, the way I would try to describe it as a feeling is if you're in a current
Hmm.
and you're clinging to something and it's exhausting. And you're afraid if you don't hold tight to the thing, everything's going to go wrong.
Hmm.
And then in a moment, you recognize what the current is, you let go, and you end up in a place of peace immediately.
Hmm.
And that metaphor could work as well for giving up and wanting and letting the current take your life. And so it could be kind of a nihilistic metaphor at the same
Hmm.
time. But it depends on whether or not you're looking up or looking down, I guess, is the way
Mm-hmm.
that I would say that.
Yeah,
As,
yeah.
God's
as
a river that will take you upstream if you believe in it, which is
well, and it's kind of the difference between going somewhere and letting go to just sink to the bottom. And
Mm-hmm.
I know I have things to live for, so though I've struggled in the past with wanting to just sink to the bottom because there's peace there as well. So far as we would assume, there's a quietness, a quiet appeal of death, but
Mm-hmm.
that's not an option for me. No longer a future I look for, and with a more positive outlook and a hopeful outlook. When I let go, my focus is on higher things rather than a quiet, comfortable end. It's that
Yeah.
it's not a finding comfort in that moment, but finding peace in the difficult thing. If that
Yeah,
it's
because
hard to
it's really
get at.
faith. Well, it's
Yeah.
faith, I think, right? Like it's
Mhm.
really faith, because and that's one of the things that I think. I mean, faith is an almost impossible thing to talk about. Just Jordan Hall is doing a pretty darn good job, and it's hard to follow. But
Mhm.
there's something fundamental about hope and faith, right? It's not faith if if hope is absent. Um,
The
I
way
think maybe that's looking up, like you talked about.
Yeah, the way I think of it or thought of it recently, and I think I posted this, it was faith is the willingness to move and hope is the energy to do so.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
having
Yeah, that's nice.
that willingness, that readiness, that anticipatory presence to do what's in front of you and finding the energy to do so in a hope that things will work out for the better,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
which is a constant struggle, especially if you're chemically inclined to be sad.
Yeah. Well, I do you feel heard there? Is there anything else you want to bring in from that story?
No, I just hope I, got the point across because it's kind of hard to, it's like he was saying, it's one of those things you can't really describe outside of just trying to come up with analogies that paint a picture of the different concoction of hormones that are flowing through you at the time.
But yeah, I mean, the ability to describe the existential states and existential shifts, you necessarily have to be poetic about it, because if you're like rigorously analytic, it completely falls apart. And but it's it is such an art form, but it's also, as far as I can tell, much better use for language than analytic or highly specific frameworks.
You're trying to describe the pattern versus the parts.
Yeah, and you're trying to take that, there's something about the actual experience of life, right? That's so fuzzy and amorphous, and it doesn't fit cleanly. It's like when you try to tell somebody a dream, and I always tend to get frustrated with myself as I'm telling someone a story of the dream, because I can feel the dream sort of like dissolving as it tries to fit into the box of my description.
You're trying to pin it down, you're ruining it by pinning it down in a sense, right? Like it's, yeah.
Yeah, but that's the thing, right? But experience is the thing. That's one of the, like, that's what we're all actually trying. That's what we're all trying to actually get right.
Exactly. One of the things that I really felt in that experience, and it resonated with your story there, Gabriel, as well. It felt to me like the motion of gratitude was about where I was starting from. This is something I've been thinking a little bit about, but without gratitude, you're starting locally as if you begin here, which your mind does, but that's not real, right? And there's something to me about gratitude that made it feel like I was beginning, with God and then coming to here after, if that it was like an order thing. It was like, if you start from yourself first, you can understand the world, but you'll never know your place in it. And it was like, to know your place, you got to let it go. And then, if you look through God's eyes first, then your own kind of naturally aligned to that, I guess. Yeah.
Proper context.
So is gratitude spinning up humility there?
I think humility is, like, to me, it felt like gratitude was the doing of it, and humility would be like the willingness, maybe similar to the faith and hope distinction you made more, but
yeah, so it was an antecedent to the gratitude.
yeah, like you have to be humble enough to do it, which
Right.
for me was being told, in that sense that it was
being
pretty
humiliated.
effective. Yeah. But the actual gratitude, the move to shift to look, to look to God before myself would be the way that I would say that it came through.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't matter how good you can see it, you can't look first if you actually want to see what's kind of, or feel anyway.
Yeah, that's a really good way of saying that. So for me, well, I guess I'll sort of stick on the same level. It's not the first or only time that I've had this experience by any means. It's more of like it's more of a state of being that I remember occasionally, intermittently, and I tend to treat those moments as, if you imagine you're knitting a tapestry with your life, I try to treat those moments as sort of like points where I knew it was that the machine was working correctly, something like that, or at least was pretty sure of it. At least it felt like it. And the way the idea goes is it's the idea that everything is okay the way it is right now, and always has been and always will be. Like a very radical sort of acceptance of just everything the way it is, and recognizing that there's a place for me in it, but it's not my I don't have the power to fix things. Not only do I not have the power to fix things, I don't even actually know what the problems are. But somebody does, and it's under control. Right? That's sort of the way of stating the idea. But I notice I often hold that idea. Like I believe that. Like I believe that in an intellectual sense. But I rarely find myself genuinely living that way. And I noticed to some degree it has to do with something about the interplay between my lived experience and the way I treat that idea. Because I tend to treat that idea as more of this like esoteric idea, because it's a hard place to get to and not be sort of, yeah, there's you have to understand that idea from the right angle or it's dangerous, I guess. Would be the way I would say that. And so anyway, yeah. So that's something I'm sort of playing with.
What comes to mind is kind of working towards the ideal, and it's you're in this kind of wave pattern where you pass through the ideal because you're still a little too erratic to occupy that same little tight little wave that the ideal is. And so you have those moments where you pass through it and you're like, oh, there it is. And then you're on the underside, and then you pass through it on the way up, and oh, there it is again, and then you're on the top side. So it's too much chaos, too much order, but somewhere in the middle you keep passing through and seeing it, and you just hope that you can slowly but surely pass through it more often and
Yeah.
get as close to resonating with it that it begins to start to amplify your life, and instead of creating that corrective dissonance that lets you know you're out of sorts.
Yeah. That's a really good way of saying that.
And we've talked too about how like almost the more you learn on this spiritual journey, you can actually feel further away because you're refining your ideal. Your ideal is getting better and closer to God, but your day-to-day isn't necessarily. And that gap, knowing what you should be or could be and not being able to get all the way there is certainly part of the challenge, right?
Well, and that's something I really appreciate. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh no, honestly, that might be the torture of hyper intellectualism.
Oh,
is because
yes.
the more you think about it, is you tighten your ideal down to such a close to perfect representation, but you're not actively embodying it yourself. And so the gap between your own state of being and your understanding becomes, like you said, further and further away. And it's just that becomes torturous.
Yes, it is. Absolutely.
I mean, that's
Like
probably why Nietzsche killed himself, like, or he went crazy and died. I don't remember the exact circumstances, but like, you can just see it.
It's somewhere between those two.
Yeah, you can see it just slowly, just the separation of recognizing what is good and but not moving towards it in any serious sort of way.
Well, I think, the capacity for Pharisaicalism, however you want to say that, is it's so enticing sometimes. Because if at least you feel like you're making progress, or at least you can sort of feel like you can measurably, measure up to your idea a little bit, then at least it's sort of like it's balm for the torture. But it makes me think a lot about what your experience was, Steve, because I mean, I think you have a tremendous, say, let's call it theory of everything that you work with, right? Like your conceptual mapping is really, in my opinion, it's fantastic, and it's super, super powerful. And I've been privileged to learn from a bunch of people who have those, and so I've got some amalgamation of all the pieces or something that does that for me too. And I also noticed that that is helpful, but it's also hard because it's easy to forget that that whole magnificent palace, right? The massive cathedral that we've built in our minds isn't the thing itself. You know, that too is a door that you need to actually go through to love the thing behind it. And you can sit there tinkering with your cathedral forever because it will never be perfect. And you can think that tinkering on your cathedral is actually worshiping God.
And it can be in some cases a way to like own part of God in the wrong way, right? Where it's like, look what I have the map or whatever, like I have, this is me. But that's starting locally. Like that's like putting God in your pocket and thinking you made the universe. It's nonsense, obviously, but there's some part of us that is kind of drawn to make these little territorial claims, or you know, it's like
Yeah.
we're trying to, I don't know if we're trying to show God how big we are, how good we are, or if we're trying to show ourselves, but there's something in that relationship of because there's a layer where it's about other people for sure, but there's also a layer where yeah, you just could behave better and you choose not to, and it's not for anyone else's sake, it's just something between you and God that still isn't figured out. That's kind of how I would describe that. And that,
Like there's the lowest level where you're sort of doing that so that you can gain manipulative power over people, right?
right. Yeah.
And then maybe there's a level above that where you're doing it because you're trying to help other people get to where you get to see what you're seeing.
Hmm.
But then if I'm hearing you right, you're saying there's something above that too, that it's just between you and God, it has nothing to do with other people.
Yeah, and it can't because it's not a piece of content, it's a piece of context, right? It's like the way in which I was framing was wrong.
Mm.
So you know, you could use a lot of that map for many things in life, but you can't use it to be. You can use it to understand the process of being and tell it to someone else, but you can't use it to be. You can use it to point you towards being, but that
Mm.
jump off the ladder at the end is just a different move entirely. It can definitely help, but it can also make it, I think there have been moments for me where some of the things I've learned have made it harder to do that jump instead of easier. And I certainly thought I was pursuing them to find God and to find my way to heaven and all that kind of stuff. But um, just for sure, there's certain things that I learned that held me back because
Yeah.
in a way, maybe not even an obvious way, but they reinforce that separation. And it's just the connection as the base fundamental place that matters. So you
Yeah.
can build whatever cathedral you want. You're building it on quicksand. Like
Yeah.
it's so humbling because it's like you're not even playing with the tools of creation. I mean, yeah, you're playing in the sandbox that got made by them. Yeah.
But it's like easier to be in some sense, it's almost you, many of your great saints aren't really intellectual people because they didn't come from this side and build a big cathedral to get to God. They started with God, and then like it didn't really matter what the structure looked like because God was coming through already.
Yeah, I would, I think I've made these kind of arguments before, but I think in this context, it's even more powerful to realize that like thought in itself is separation. It, being good at thinking is being amazing at separating things and proportionally separating things. Um, whereas I would put intuition as connecting things. It's a different kind of process, right? Um, it's very much like that, where it's like, well, you can build whatever you want out of pieces, but once you get to the end and you realize that all the pieces you put together made a whole, you're defeated. Like the puzzle you're on defeats itself. It's just, it can complete. It's very hard to do, but you can complete it. And when you do, it erases the need for itself. It's a ridiculous maze, basically.
Yeah, it's that thing. I think it was what Kant said about Hegel. He built a
Mm,
magnificent system and sat down beside it.
Yeah, I never used it exactly. Yeah.
It's just that you can't, right? If the whole world is a system and it works a certain way, like you finish it, you polish it off, it looks nice, and then it's like, well, now what do you do, right?
You can't even help people with it because it's in your language and they don't
Yeah.
speak the same language. I mean, honestly, to be honest with you, the most frustrating thing for me has been I took a lot of this journey and it took a lot of, physical pain and stuff like that, emotional pain too. And I was doing it, I thought I was doing it trying to help people, but wasn't able to help people as much as I thought I was going to be able to with it because the knowledge was more personal than I had realized. And I'm still coming to realize that, but it's like, it is frustrating to me to think that I personally have found things and it's so hard to share them with other people because the truth of it is I couldn't have gone on this journey if I didn't do it for other people or
Mm.
for not myself, for others, right? Like that's what started me on the journey, was realizing that I just didn't have enough to do the journey. Like who I was at that point in time, I had to be let go because they weren't going to make it. It didn't mean I was going to make it as a system or as a process, but that version of me was just totally inadequate. And all of my transcendental transformational experiences have been realizations of just like my complete inadequacy, which is probably the very thing I'm trying to avoid recognizing in the first place. Well, keep having those realizations. But yeah.
Yeah, I think in my worst moments, getting like sucked into the obsession of trying to sort these things out, I see the rest of my life immediately falling into neglect. And
Mm.
the pain of that, if I don't respond to it by setting it down and I just push further in,
Mm.
it becomes more and more overwhelming. And it's like I have to solve this so I can enjoy my life. It's like, no. Like
Yeah.
you have to be able to enjoy your life to even see what this is. Like,
Yeah.
and I mean enjoy, not in the sense of comforts and pleasure, but being entirely present in the pain, the beautiful pain of raising children, of building a relationship with your wife and working through all your hangups and traumas and difficulties. And that's the joy of the thing, is the relationship. And I think to kind of go back to what you were saying, Steve, the words that came to mind are kind of the difference between salience and relevance. Because you have all these parts that you can recognize, kind of like I was mentioning earlier, the parts in the pattern, but it's the pattern comes together and you start to see how things work, but it's just so simple to say if you're not living it. Like it's just it becomes a dead thing in your hands. And it's, I do wonder about that. It's like I'm making this thing, and I'm being a builder of things. I recognize, like physical things, I recognize if I can't make it, I don't really understand it. And so driving towards that threshold, and this may or may not be something that's healthy or helpful either, but kind of navigating that space of what is this worth? Like what is my model doing? Is it going to help people? It, to the extent that I can apply it, it does seem so separate though, because it's not like I'm actually like sitting there like using some sort of remote to dial my life about that I've created. I have to set the thing down in order to move into those relationships. Like you said, it's such a personal language that you can't drag it over and it's like, okay, this is how we're going to sort it out between us. You have to set that thing down and then go sort things out between you and whoever else it is you're trying to build that relationship with. And there's something painful about that and difficult to sort out, because it's like I enjoy deeply when I'm in a good space and I'm searching through these things and trying to sort these things out. But maybe it's just a matter of priorities in order, because I think there is something worshipful about seeking to understand the creator through the creation. But if you neglect that, the relationship of it, that circle is not complete, and the decay sets in immediately. To circle back on what I was saying at the beginning. So it's a pain. This is very timely, and it's a painful thing to think about, and to hear you relating something very similar to what I'm struggling with as well. And I don't know just what it means at the moment for me, but I know that's where my struggle is right now, is just, what do I do with all this, and how do I live in the best way? And definitely,
Yeah.
with all the insecurity right now, I'm feeling it. It's especially palpable, tangible at the moment.
You know, I think in certain ways you plucked a star from the universe and you brought it into your room. And that's an amazing thing. You're trying to figure out how to share that. And I think there's an undeniable beauty about what you've created. I don't want to imply it there isn't in any way, because I think there really is. But I think it also needs to be approached the right way, because for me, probably the way I've, gone off the path from God the most myself personally is by overcommitting to my mission, or my grandest mission, you might say, and forgetting my true responsibilities, might be the way to say it. Like, neglect of people I care about, my family and things like that, to pursue these things that I'm hoping are going to help people, but I'm hurting people when I'm trying to help people in the future in this more abstract way. And I don't have the answers there either, because it's just an active struggle for me. But there's something about, I know the mission is valuable, but I'm throwing too much away for it. I'm rushing. I'm trying to do it now. It's like, that's the journey for my whole life. And I'm like, we're talking about the proportions of even in your system, right? And it's like, oh, that's the highest goal. I know that if I could get the rest of the system to the place where I was always doing that, I would be amazing. But going about that the wrong way is putting all of my salience, all of my attention on the mission, and crushing the rest of my life. That is what enabled me to pursue that mission, if that makes sense. Like, I feel like I've been like grinding myself down with the mission, and thinking that was glorious to do that. Might be the way that I would say it.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a sort of martyrdom possibility, which always becomes more, it's easier to see yourself as a martyr the more you have a sense that you truly are pursuing God, right?
Well, if you're going after everything, then you'll give up anything for that, right? Like, that's the stakes.
And it's
go
not
up.
like that's wrong. It's not like that's wrong. It's just that we are very easily deceived by ourselves.
Because how easy is it to go from I'm doing this for God and for other people, like genuinely, to how good of a person would I be if I was doing this for, like, that move is just so subtle, and you pull that on yourself all the time.
Well, it's so often the case that, at least I find, that I'm genuinely ambivalent, in the sense that, like, more than one thing is active at once. And this is true. I mean this on every level. Like, I mean this even when I'm mapping things. I'm mapping things and trying to understand, and I'm, when something's grabbed me and I'm deep in the books and missing things in my life because of it or something. There's a part of it that is just, genuinely that I've caught the scent of something for a little while. And so I'm following that. And I think in that there is a genuine, like, a deep connection to the good, a love of God that's very active and alive, that sustains me in that quest. And also there's a little part of me that's, you know, trying to hold on to this so that it always is this way.
Hmm.
And that's sort of starting to create friction. And then, you know, because I don't know, I find that when I'm in the purest of those moments, right, when the logos is really, when I've heard the bells of the logos, and I'm, you know, trying to, I've grabbed onto the sleigh bell at the edge of the sleigh, right, and the times that that's been the most clear, and I've been the most engrossed in thought, or you know, reading a book or something, my capacity to find relevant a need of my wife or my child, and switch to that with remarkable presence and helpfulness and connection, it's right there. It's as high as it ever is. And if I do that, then the logos goes there, because the logos really does go there, right? The logos isn't in the book. The logos is just right. It's like the waveform, the ideal in the waveform that Gabriel was talking about earlier.
Hmm.
So I think there's
The
something about, like, when you find yourself in those moments, you know, when something about, you know, your cathedral is made available to you or salient to you to work on and learn about and explore. Mount Sophia, if you're stick with my thing. When that's made available to you, it seems like there's a, I often find, and I don't know if it's always the case, this is uh like a path to a cliff or not, but it seems like it often is for me, that if I'm doing it because I want to fix something about myself or anyone else, but if it's anyone else, I think it always is a cliff. But like, even if it's about myself, I think that path always goes bad. But if I'm following it just for its own sake, and then, you know, I'm willing to follow other things on the way, it's great. But there's just little flecks that start to come off. Like you start to lose it as soon as you try to hold on to it and do that instead of the things that show up. Like, if you think the logos is in the idea that you're following, you lose it.
Hmm.
That makes me think, I've noticed a pattern. I'm I'm going to be saying these things out loud as much for me as anybody else, because I need to see them, and I need those little red flags to get planted so that I can start to navigate this better. But I've noticed that in the moments, say I'll wake up early in the morning and I'll have time to work on it before the kids get up, and I'll just have that moment. Usually I have my routine, I slip into it, and it flows nicely, and I come to it a meaningful point of like marked progression, and there's that moment of light. And if I stop there and, like you say, move into the rest of my life, I carry that light with me. But if I'm like, I want more of this, so I'm going to take this
Mhm.
deeper, it immediately just, it's like, no, like you made, you did your work for the day. Now it's time for other things.
Yeah.
And really
Yeah.
understanding the rhythm of life and the timing of God as it's spread out across the days and weeks and years, and letting that light shine, and then setting everything down and just carrying
Yeah.
it with you. Because it's so common for me to be like, oh, that's really good, let's take that and try to go further. And it's like, no, you need to meditate on that moment of illumination, because there's something deeper there, and likely something that will be further revealed in its design, in its dimension, in what it is, as you move through the week, meditating on that, as you move through at least the rest of your day, meditating on what it is, and carrying it about, kind of shining it on the rest of your life. Your daily routine. It's almost like you have a consistent day, relatively consistent daily routine that you go through, and Lord willing, you make these little bits of progress in your understanding. And each time you make a little bit of progress, rather than trying to push past that, taking that and just shining it on what is the same for you in a daily way, and seeing that in a new light, and in the next day, same routine but new light, same routine but new light. And just I think, like I said, saying this for myself, I think I'm in a hurry to make progress more than I'm willing to remember that part of the progress is patiently observing the change that came about based on, like I said, a little bit of light. And that really is a place where I fail consistently, is to not meditate on a moment of clarity, and try to wield that and make more happen.
Yeah. Yeah, because what you really want, the whole reason you're doing the system in the first place, sort of like what Steve said earlier, is to be the sort of person that can find the light. Like that's the whole reason you're doing the system at all, right? And it's so hard to remember that once you really, have something going in a system. But if you can be if it's actually changing you to be the sort of person who can see the light in a way that brings wonder and newness and life to every day, right? I loved the way you said that, right? See the things that are the same in every day in a new way. And if you do that every day, then every day is truly a new day. And then you're living in wonder, and then you're becoming a child again. And then,
And I think to even add on to that, then you will achieve your mission. But that's the craziest part of
absolutely,
it, right? Like the thing that isn't your language is your being. Like somehow everyone will see, if we were to truly embody this, you would convince everyone you came across. You wouldn't have to, run through all the knowledge and the model. Jesus was just making eye contact with people and doing the same thing. Like it's what needs to happen is it needs to be embodied and displayed. And I'm trying to figure out, like, somewhere for me, I've got this issue with the mundane, or like if it's not grand enough, then I don't want to pursue it. There's something there for me, because there's two pieces. There's that side of it, and there's also like I struggle to like shine the light. Like I want to talk about it like it's something I found. Like I go, oh, look at this. Let's all look at that, not me. Let's look at this thing. I'm comfortable with that. But like when it comes to like, okay, now display what you found in use. There's like a discomfort, but also like I know that that's the real mission in a sense. And that I'm like working on this thing over here that is going to help me, and it is part of the mission, but I'm pretending this thing is the whole mission, when like this is the whole mission, basically. Like it's yeah. I don't know if I see a connection between the mundane and the other thing there, if those are two separate points, because I'm still a bit confused on that.
Dude, this is so true for me too. It's so true.
It makes me think of y'all know who Miyazaki is? The filmmaker. Does animated films, a Japanese filmmaker. And one of the things I love most about his films is he takes daily tasks and simple things like cooking meals or doing laundry, and he'll animate these throughout his films, just little simple things, and there's a vibrance and a rhythm and a beauty and a light that comes out of your screen that captures those moments in a way that makes you appreciate them. And I just think of those like in my kids love Totoro, the My Neighbor Totoro movie. and there's a lot of domestic scenes in that, but it's the way the characters approach those tasks and the way they're done and the way they're portrayed that just makes them feel so much more robust than when you sort of, it's like, oh, I have this chore that I do daily and I kind of brush through it, but more, it gives it a substance and a light that has a weightiness that impresses itself upon you, and you feel the value of it, and you feel there's a peace to be had in being able to approach a mundane task and recognizing that you're able and capable of doing it well, and of it being completed, and that adding some order to your life upon which you can build the rest of your day. And so it suddenly plays a part in the whole of your experience and the whole of your home and the whole of your relationships. And it has its place and its part to play in making yourself, your family, your community whole by completing that simple little task. And it's like adding bricks to a wall, or like little bits of colored glass to a window, a artistic stained glass window. Is just something so simple that added up all together with everything else that you do, you can see in the bit, you can see the beauty of it, and you can also see the part that it plays in holding up everything else. And the more I try to, the more attention I place out into the future, the more dull my life becomes, because all of the light is here right now. And as my attention moves out further into that darkness of the unknown, like the darkness enters into me, and I see that gloom of living in insecurity, of not knowing what the future is, rather than the security of the present moment. And what I am able to do, I can wash the dishes, I can fold the laundry, I can take my kids over to the park to play, like, and that's where the light is. But the less my attention is here, and the more it's out there, the darker it is by nature.
Yeah. This is very much the place that I'm referring to earlier when I was talking about my experience, is that there's something about a deep acceptance and trust. It's not just acceptance, it's trust. A trust that all things really do work together for good. That it seems to be the key to making what's actually now real to you. You know, because otherwise what I find in myself is that I'm constantly finding the mundane to be mundane because there's something that I deem to be of greater importance. And that thing that I deem to be of greater importance is, I actually have never found it to be actually more important. No matter what it is. It can be the most important thing in terms of my life might hinge upon it, and someone else's might. I mean, I do medicine, so that's often the case, but I've never yet made a decision that's only available to me in the future now. That's one thing to know that, right? Like, and this is the thing that's tricky about using this concept that I'm talking about here, is like, it's one thing to know it, it's a wholly different thing to to, I don't even like the word embody because it feels too materialistic or something. It's like to existentially inhabit that as a mode of being. To existentially give oneself over to trust. Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
in those positive moments of study, I think I can bear the blur that happens when I extend myself into the past and the future, where I'm thinking predictively and I'm analyzing what has and happened, what has brought me here. But then when it's time to be present, I think that's, if I carry that blur into my relationships, then I can't be fully present in those moments. And that there's a certain irritability that kind of manifests because I'm not there all the way. I'm stretched out in places that I need not be in that moment. And I think it's kind of like thinking about what I call maybe a causal gap where a decision is made, where you have to make a choice in between the previous moment and the next moment. There's this kind of opening up. If you believe in free will, there seems to be an opening up. How am I going to respond to this? How am I going to let this change me? Am I going to take it in a positive or a negative direction? And I do it in order to move forward. I have to make a decision about how I'm going to let whatever circumstance experiences come to me, how I'm going to let that change me. And I can kind of direct the flow of that energy. That seems the extent of free will, is just that little toggle of, am I going to humility or pride? Like what path am I going to split down based on the energy of this circumstance that has come to me? And it's the same thing, that kind of the excitation that happens in that moment of decision that gives you that little space to make a choice, is also it feels to be a parallel when you're in that intellectual study, because you're kind of actively pulling that thing apart so that you can see the inner workings of the thing. But if you don't close that back down and you move out of that place where it belongs, which is, at your desk, at your place of study. But if you move out into the relationship with your wife and you still have this orb of unknown hyper qualifications and categorizations and contextualizations, it makes the relationship a mess. And so you have to close, in the same way that you have to make a choice moving forward, you have to settle that into a sufficient state of conclusion that it can rest on your desk until you return and move back in and into your life, is what comes to mind, because I've been wrestling with that idea of free will and where that would be, and it seems that it has a parallel in living with others. Is for the relationship to be dynamic, you have to be able to move, and in order to move, you may have to make decisions, and decisions by nature collapse certain things. And there's really nothing more frustrating than someone who won't decide. Like the cliche of your wife not knowing where she wants to eat dinner. It's like, please just make a choice. But in the same sense,
solve the entire universe later. Just choose where we're going for dinner.
Better yet, I'm going to do it at dinner.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. But I think like just to speak to that, I think so much of that resonates with me, and it is the stakes are extremely high, right? Because we're not talking about being the next room over, we're talking about being a galaxy away from the people that we care the most about, and that's something that I really need to work on. It's something that um that illusion of closeness versus the actual closeness.
Mhm.
Do you think God is in the logic of your mental map, or is it in the other people in the world with you? And I say it like that because it is so obvious, but yet this part of me wants to run away and solve this grand thing. Um, and yeah, like I said, like you can get pretty far on it. It's a fun journey, but at the end of the day, you're just going to be faced with the realization that you did it wrong if you do that, right? Like it's it's such a solved puzzle in some sense. Not all the detail and all that kind of thing, but it's just I don't know. I want to share something with you guys. I don't know how to say it, but it's like me and Ken, we talked about this a little bit about how, I was very scared about the future of humanity, where things were going as a species and where we're headed with AI and all this kind of stuff that could it's hard to see a way forward that humanity survives. That's the place I was at. And I think like the reason I got so caught up in my mission was because I thought like not that I was the only one, but that it was so important to do this now immediately as hard as possible because there's not enough time. It's going to run out. Like I thought that it was a test that God had set up for me, not just me, but for humanity to solve would be the way to put it that way, right? And I think lately I've been realizing like it's really not that. Like that is me separating myself from God and taking on his role for humans and then being mad at humans that they're not already God. That's like pretty quick summary. But it's yeah, doesn't make you seem too smart when you realize some of those things. But that was the loop. It was basically like, why isn't humanity already solved this? And then I'm gonna judge them because they should be, and I should be like God. And so I judged myself and people that way, which is a way you can't do that unless you get yourself caught up in these maps and these kind of things too, right? At least not in the same way. So that was a really deep tangle for me.
Yours is your motivation. It makes me laugh because your motivation is much more grandiose than mine because I feel the weight of like with the job situation, the unknown. It's like if I could solve this, I could maybe find a way to provide for my family so I don't have to like I could figure out some way to make this work to solve the immediate problem that I have right now.
Yeah.
Like there's that almost trivial little reality to it, hoping on a deeper level that it would help, you know, help in some way. Like you said, the danger of the trajectory we seem to be on. But I find myself much less afraid of that and more easily overwhelmed by the immediate state of insecurity that I'm wrestling with. So I I wonder if I'm kind of if there's somewhere between that is a more ideal place to be because I feel like I'm dragged away from the larger concerns into just the trivialities of the very close situation that I'm in. But I think in a sense it's all the same too, because if I can't trust him with, putting food on the table, then I certainly can't trust him with guiding civilization away from destruction.
Yeah.
So whether I'm struggling at that level or or down at the level of the grocery bill, it's there's really not much difference to it in the end.
Can resonate with that. I am kind of curious to ask you guys a question because this is sort of how my story that I was sharing relates to the thing we talked about with Rebecca as well. I'm kind of curious if you guys, if it's maybe the answer is not obvious, but if it is, do you feel that you struggle more with feeling that you're loved by God or loving God? And I'm just trying to point at the directionality of that, because we talked about how both are important and critical to, wisdom and love emerge from each other. But is your block more likely to be that you can't fully embrace the love that God is offering you, and you don't think you're worthy of that? Or is it more of a sense of still having a resentment towards God for the state of the world? Or you feel loved, you feel empowered and blessed, but you're not able to return it.
I would put it more, it's easier for me to trust my vision of his hand on the course of history than it is my vision of his hand on the movement of my life as an individual. And I think what it boils down to for me, we didn't have C.S. Lewis in my house. We had Tolkien, so I was a Tolkien kid.
Mhm.
But so for the first time, I'm reading the Narnia series, and I'm reading it to my kids. My two oldest boys are the ones that are paying attention. And we went through Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe recently, and we hit that little part with Santa, and I had to fight with everything in me not to break down in tears with that part with Santa. Because what I saw in that moment is the absolute uninhibited delight of God to bring joy to your life and provide a meal and warm the soul for what appears to be no reason at all except for the season. Like I could not, that is where I struggle most, is feeling that God delights in me. I don't, I cannot seem to internalize that. And I want to so badly to believe at the center of me that I am delighted in and to understand what that means. Because I don't understand.
Yeah.
But I think a cool line you drew there is that you don't feel it personally, maybe, but you do feel it that God has that for humanity, like for the species. Is that true? Like it's just the
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
Because it's easier for me to delight in others
Yeah.
and rather than myself. And so I can see, I can taste God's delight in others because I can see, I think, more clearly just the value that they have in the midst of their struggles. But I cannot see that for myself. And I think that's something too that kind of Peterson will talk about, like men are starving for encouragement. And I think that's something that masculine relationships offer to each other, is that encouragement that channels the delight of God into men's hearts. And I think there's something
that's
there.
good. Whew.
That
one hit me. That was good.
Because
I felt that.
That lack of bro time that energizes you.
Yeah.
And allowing yourself to really enter into that space of being vulnerable and violent at the same time. Like you can dump all over each other and hit each other and make fun of each other and wrestle about one way or another. But there's something that fills you up. That's what it is. It's your dad wrestling with you. And in that active tussle, you feel his delight in fighting against his strength and testing your strength against his, in the tension of your own muscles as you roll about with your father And maybe that's what it comes down to, is entering into that playful wrestling match with God. And Peterson's new book.
I was gonna say Peter,
God.
that like the little Peterson is dancing for joy over here.
Yeah, but I mean, that's how it's coming to me right now, is just that
But
I don't know that we can get it anywhere but from the masculine. And the masculine is so deteriorated and talked down and torn apart nowadays, that, and struggle with your own relationship with your own father, that understanding of delight is so hard to come by, because we don't have the channel open for it right now.
that's, yeah, man, there's something about it. Whew.
Because the wrestling, I wonder with Peterson if the wrestling is more a struggle, when I think the wrestling, when you think of, because I'll remember that moments with my dad when we would wrestle, and the unmitigated joy
Hmm.
of being entirely in that moment, knowing you can't overcome your father, but trying to do so not in a way that's, I want to get one up on my dad. It's, I know if I overcome him, whatever that means, that he let me do so because he delights in me, and he joys in the joy of my own accomplishment, even if I understand that accomplishment was handed to me out of love from my own father. Like, and I want that to sink into my soul, because I know the truth of that delight is where the peace is where the clarity of presence in the moment is. Because I
Hmm.
can know that if I can truly know that I am delighted in, I can be at peace in the moment.
It's almost like you're fully held up by something else.
I think there's no threat from your father, right? You know he loves you. So even when it gets rough, failure is going to be fun too.
Mhm.
I think on some level in our
Hmm.
real lives, we get caught up in this, like somehow what ought to be lovable or worthy about me is how hard I fight, how seriously I take the fight.
Hmm.
That's what I give myself value for in my own loop.
Hmm.
But that's specifically not playing in the way that you're talking about, right? Like I'm trying to win the wrestling match with my dad, thinking that I can.
Yeah.
Like that's how silly it is at the end of the day. But that's
Yeah.
what we're doing, right? Like I haven't won yet because I haven't spent enough time, or I haven't
Yeah.
committed myself so solely to this yet. But
Yeah.
No,
no,
you nailed it.
you're not playing.
Yeah, man. There's something about this, to go back to your original question, Steve, of struggling to love God, or be loved by God.
Hmm.
I struggle with the question, and I feel like the answer is somewhere in Gabriel's answer too, because it's really weird for me when I make it that binary,
Hmm.
because I find that the more I love God, the more I find that it's Him loving me the whole
Hmm.
time. But at the same time, like when I just try to force it, and it's like I can This doesn't often happen. It generally tends to be the case that if I truly sort of gather myself together into, whatever unity I can manage from wherever I am, and genuinely will toward the love of God. I don't know if that ever hasn't turned something on. It certainly doesn't necessarily turn on a sort of fullness of a sense of being delighted in, like Gabriel is pointing to. Which I think, man, that was beautiful, Gabriel. That was beautiful. Like I really love that you brought out that being delighted in. Like there's something so right about that. I guess I don't know. I think I often forget to love God well. Because I tend to think that loving God well means something other than just doing the mundane things. I tend to think of it as being that moment where I gather all of myself together and truly quiet my mind in prayer and genuinely seek the face of God. And not that that isn't it, but I'm not as, yeah, it's that sort of practicing the presence of God thing in every moment, seeing every aspect of reality as an icon of God. It's like weird because you sort of have to run an extra layer of analysis to keep reminding you of that, even while you're doing the things. And it's really easy. What I find to happen when I do that is that it tends to work for a little while, and then I start getting, sort of, maybe it's just that I get impressed with myself, or maybe there's an insight that pops up from it or something, and then I sort of jump into that, and then I start.
Yeah, I always go to the analogy of like ping pong rally, because for some reason, whenever I'm in a ping pong rally and it goes on long enough, my mind just starts exploding. Like, this is the greatest ping pong rally ever. I can't believe this is still happening. Like, it becomes hard to play just because I'm so distracted with how, amazing this is. But then you lose the rally. You know what I mean? Like you could have kept playing, but you're just amazed by how it just kind of seemed like a analogous to what you were saying there.
Yes. Yep.
No, that's good. It almost feels like the rally should end in that way. Like, what better way for it to end than you sort of melting in awe of the beauty of the thing?
Yeah.
But how can you melt in awe and still play? I think
Yeah.
that's the
Yeah.
because you can just melt in awe and be passive and do nothing in life that represents that awe. But if you can channel that awe and be it, and give other people that experience. And I think that there's something with this wrestling thing, because the playful wrestling, because we really are tossed about by the universe. It throws us around. You don't control much of your life. We talked about how limited free will is. Just think about how many inputs are coming at you while you have that limited of a dial on the inside. And yeah, like getting tossed around is terrifying if you don't trust the person. But getting tossed around if you trust the person is so much fun. Like there's something about being like by using tossed, because it's so disorienting to be tossed around. That's why I'm saying. Whereas we're trying to like fix a frame, a perfect frame. Like, oh, I looked at it perfectly once. I'm gonna just remember that and do that again, so I don't have to be tossed around. Because I don't like being tossed around. Because I am valuable because of how well I can hold this damn frame. No one can hold this one way of looking at God like I can. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah. Quick, everybody jump through here.
yeah. I got the portal open.
Yeah, yeah. Dive.
No, I like
Yeah.
that. Getting tossed around is terrifying unless you trust the tosser. I
Yeah.
like that.
Well, I mean, I can't believe we haven't said his name, but he's been here this whole time in the conversation. For me, I don't think we said his name, but Jesus clearly does this, right? I mean, I I think it's very underemphasized in Jesus's teaching how much he emphasizes living in the moment and not not planning for the future and not building a house and not like, the church is by definition the attempt to preserve the ongoing, and I have no idea how the church works, or I mean I know enough to know that I don't know at all what is going on with the church, but my sense from Jesus is that when you're really doing the thing, you're trusting the tosser. Like that for me is the surest absolute way to know that you're doing the thing, that you're walking in the kingdom of heaven, is that you have genuine trust, because that's what he had. That's, if there's one thing that defines Jesus's life, it's it's trust and surrender to the point of death, to death on the cross. Despite, I mean, man, like, can you imagine, right, facing what Jesus faced, going through what he went through, with this sort of like, I don't know if this is true for you guys, but there's almost nothing that will create more anger in me than when I am disrespected despite being innocent, right? And in fact, knowing that I'm better than the person who's disrespecting me. And Jesus had that to the nth degree, and then there's the physical suffering on top of it, which is bad, but like, I mean, the sort of suffering, the sort of like social, and I mean, everything is crazy. And can you imagine doing that, knowing that you have, at every moment, knowing that you have the power to not do it? Right? It's not just that he went through all that. It's that, like, I can't stand an itch on my leg for 5 seconds if I have the power to change it.
That's the difference. I think you just hit another layer of grace or gratitude, because that's the difference. Like if I had if I was in that position, what would I do differently? I would change everyone's mind immediately. Like that would be like me applying myself to that scenario, which would be horrible. Like he recognized the need for his own suffering and bad things to happen, even in, like you're saying, with that scenario. It's, yeah, it's just really revealing, like, that I haven't been as pure in my intentions as I desire it to be, because there's a little bit of a like wanting to fix other people in that he
Yeah.
didn't have. But I think that, like, this extra layer of grace, that like, I'm not doing this just so that I get grace back. I will do this as you kill me. I will do this as you insult me, as you
Yeah.
degrade me, as you degrade God, the Heavenly Father.
Yeah.
And I will still show you grace. Like that. I don't know what that is, just being honest. Like, I think
Yeah.
that sounds like a wonderful place to journey towards, but there's something there for me to look at.
What comes to mind is you think of, not very, it's kind of a testy topic now, but physically disciplining your child, and you can, swat them on the thigh or whatever in discipline. But I found that wrestling with them, my boys will punch the hell out of you, and I will give them back the same strength of strike. And in any sort of, the rare case of physical discipline has never reached the intensity of the play, the strike during play. So I can hit them squarely in the chest with some force, which I would never do in the moment of discipline, and they will laugh and swing at me. And to take those hits of life in the context of play instead of
Mm,
discipline. I mean, certainly in the moments where you're being corrected, but to move into the state where you've been heeding your father's correction and now you can play, and to take those shots that are tenfold what they were in the moments of correction and laugh and press in is just something I want so badly. It for my own psyche to just be in that state of play instead of
yeah.
instead of instead of because it's almost like even if you've grown past the point of correction and you are very much so on the right path, at least in comparison to where you have been, you can still have that mindset of, flinching rather than enjoying the endorphins that flush your body full of excitement as you thrive on that painful strike, because it really pain really is a drug. And this is something,
Mm,
struggling with depression when I was younger, pain was one of the things I went to soften the edge of that despair. And so I would exercise, I would play violent sports, I would harm myself in pursuit of the calm that would come from that sharp pain.
Mm.
And but finding that anew in its proper context and rejoicing in this in the impact of the blow because you are robust enough to withstand it, just changing from that mindset of cowering and flinching and turning away and recognizing what you have become by the grace of the Father who is guiding you and training you and teaching you, and then moving fully into that newfound athleticism spiritually, intellectually, mentally, physically, and 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 joyfully experiencing the wholeness of meaningful suffering that is giving yourself for the people you love and living fully in the relationships that matter most. And I want that. And I can see it. It's kind of like we talked about moving through that ideal. And it's like, there it is. I can see it. Why can't I? I just want to stay there. I want to stay as close to that as I can. And I'm still just glimpses of it, glimpses of it, glimpses of it. And I want that. I think that's when suffering becomes something more than what it's decayed to in our current vernacular.
I am. I find myself so hmm, the 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 options of how to deal with suffering and how to approach suffering and the various ways of making sense of suffering, philosophical, religious, psychological. I I think it really is the key. There's something about suffering. I think it really is the key to learn how to hold oneself, how to posture oneself in relation to suffering. It feels to me like the thing. I don't know if that's just for me for right now where I'm at in my journey, but like when my wife had our second child 6 months ago, in the time leading up to it, we were thinking and talking about suffering, and I was asking the question, how does suffering become joy? What's the relationship between joy and suffering? That seems to be something that's pretty clear in scripture, that there's a connection between joy and suffering. And my wife told me after like a week after Asher had been born, she described her experience in the labor with me to me. And it was unmedicated natural birth. She had both of our children that way. And she went into it. She didn't tell me this was going to be what she did, but she went into it with that question. Like, what's the relationship between joy and suffering? And so she just sort of existentialized that question in really like maybe the archetypal moment of suffering. If there's,
Just joy too, yeah.
child, the travail of childbirth is sort of definitional of suffering. And she said that her experience of it, because that was sort of, she took some of the postures that are part of like the some of the practices in like dialectic into dialogos and stuff from John stuff, and sort of attempted to aim towards the virtue of joy, in like try to take the energy of the suffering and just sort of like open up to the virtue of joy with it. And she said like it was just an unbelievable experience of joy until the moment that she became afraid. Because my son had, the cord was all wrapped around him, and because it was sort of like a natural, it wasn't at home, but it wasn't at a hospital either, it was at a birth center. And so when we sort of realized that, or at least we intuited it, and there was a little bit more like, oh, maybe this isn't 100% just everything is going well, she started to get afraid, and then she forgot, like she just forgot to aim toward joy, and then it became pain.
It's amazing to see even such an extreme example that it comes down to just like that toggle switch. There's like the forgetting, the distraction. It's so easy to slip off. But what did she slip off of? Like, there's something else that was the movement away from joy, fear, right?
Yeah.
I think so much of it may be a matter of context, because it seems the laugh comes in pain when you realize it can't destroy you. It can't destroy what you love. It can't destroy what matters most. Like even, heaven forbid you had lost your son in that situation. In matters of faith, you will see him again. And so what matters most is maintained regardless, because death has been defeated. And so
this is what,
yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, but that right there is why I find myself inescapably a Christian. All of this that we're talking about, but this particularly, it's like you're never going to know beyond, you're never going to know with certainty what's true, which means you're just picking the best thing. And if there's a thing that allows you to bear up under ultimate suffering with ultimate love, at least potentially, at least that's what it offers you. And it seems to be genuinely accessible. Like there seem to be people who've actually done that. Not just Jesus. Like Jesus did, and that's great, obviously. But like there were also other people that have done it too. And like I just don't know what more you can have, what more you might want than that. Or what else you could want.
Yeah. Just that eternal security for what matters most.
Yeah.
And suffering in the context of that does not rise above a certain threshold. So if you can live above that threshold, that suffering as real as it is in the moment and the flesh and the psyche.
Your soul is always beyond it.
Yeah, and that's where the laugh comes.
Mm-hmm.
That outburst of joy is that moment where you realize it cannot destroy you, no matter how ugly it gets.
I think that goes right back to the wrestling thing, because it's the laugh is, you could defeat me, but you will not defeat my father.
Yeah.
Its strength is unquestionable, unmatchable. Like it's just, you can defeat me. I think that's what we're afraid of, admitting that part. But defeating me doesn't defeat me, because my father is infinite.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah. Yeah.
and
that
we want
that takes you
to play, right? Sorry, go ahead, Ken.
No. You're good.
That's all I was going to say with that is, like, we want this infinite security just so that we can play. All we're asking is permission to play.
Nailed it. Infinite
And the wild thing is,
security.
it's been there the whole time.
Yeah, you already have
Yeah.
it. You just don't believe it in one way or another.
Well, and it's so funny because it's self-evident. Like it's literally, it has to be the case because we're here.
Mhm.
And you can't possibly do anything to deserve to be here. You can do things to make it obvious that you're less than you could be,
Mm.
which then makes it quite clear that there's an argument to be made that maybe you don't deserve to be here. And that, hence all our self-judgment and all our inability to understand the delight of God in us, right?
Mm.
But even if you never do anything wrong, you still can't make a case to deserve to be here on your own right, which means you're already held up by something beyond yourself.
You don't even start with yourself. Like you can't understand yourself if you start there.
And same thing for the whole show, right? It's turtles all the way down.
I think that I don't know that there's a difference between the security and feeling the delight of your father.
Mm-hmm.
It is the same thing. Because to truly feel his delight is to be secure. And that seems to be the pinnacle of the relationship as far as trust goes.
Because you already know he's that strong.
Yeah.
But when his delight is what shows you that he'll use his strength for you. That's the confidence that comes through there, that you're not alone, that you have the whole universe whenever you need it.
He can carry you through. He can sustain you. And the suffering cannot destroy you.
And I think the other side of it, though, that strikes me right now is that there's a both andness to it, because it's not like it's a cheap deal, though. Because price you pay for admission to that security is you getting to define anything, right? You even getting to say, like, I know what my needs are. You don't,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, and I think that's the price that we, at least for me, that's the price that I won't pay. because oftentimes it's something very, very good, right? It seems to be very good that I think I need. But, or that I think somebody else needs. Take something is so simple. This is the thing. This is the thing for me this year is like, be in relationships with people who are in pain and not being able to do anything about it. But tending to think that I could do something about it if I let myself. Right? Like my mind will often tell me you could do something about this and you could fix this.
But what
make
are
it
you
better.
fixing?
And how do I know that even if it did fix whatever I think the problem is, that would actually be what's good for this other person? And
mean,
so
that's
trying to understand the demarcating line between me taking it into my own hands to make the world into the image I think it should be, and me trying to serve God by easing the suffering of others. I don't understand that line.
I think in the extreme case of dealing with an addict, so often you end up an enabler by mitigating the consequence. Because in order to recognize where you are, you need a proper set of feedback, proper set of data. And if you're artificially manipulating the data of feedback for this person because you don't want them to suffer, at what point are you handicapping their recovery? And
Yeah.
I mean, it's said so often that it's almost cliche just in dealing with addiction, but that really is, there's some deep truth to that. Is you can't muck with the mechanism of measure for the person, because how else are they going to identify where they are? How else are they going to see it without the proper set of of sensory or otherwise experience? And just having dealt with addiction very close to me and seeing how other people were enabling the person, and I, for whatever reason, I have that visceral disgust towards easing the struggle when I can see that the struggle is what strengthens the person to give them what is necessary to climb out of the hole they're in. And I see these people constantly undermining the development of this person by removing the struggle, that it was infuriating. And so often, going back to what you were saying, Ken, about people thinking something about you that's not true, I would come across as even the cause of the addiction because I refused to ease the struggle of the person by fulfilling certain expectations of me as far as what it means to live a good life. You know, something as silly as you need to have 2 cars and you need to have a certain type of house and you need to live in a certain type of place and you have to have a certain set of benefits. And if you would just do those things, this person would be better.
Mm.
And just, it was a constant call for me to make this person's life easier rather than, and I should just say it's my wife because I've talked about this.
Mm.
Sounds silly to talk about it that way, and she's made it clear I'm free to have these conversations, but it was a constant. She slipped and fell. You're making it too difficult for her. Things are too difficult. You take away responsibilities, lighten the load. And there's obviously a line, but at the same time, no, she has to take up these burdens. She has to start carrying these things. She has to start taking responsibility. Because that's how the muscles develop. That's how the resolve is refined. That's how the determination is instilled deeply into the heart of the individual. And because I love her deeply, I feel like I betray her when I do not, when I carry something for her that she could carry herself, when I take up something that she should be taking up herself. And praying and constantly trying to understand the line of too much and too little. And when I see that line clearly, standing firm and knowing that you need to lift this and you need to carry it. If I do it for you, we're going to stay where we are because you can't climb further than where you are now unless you grow. And by God's grace, in the end, I've been proven right for what it's worth. And it's worth a lot to me. And to hear her express gratitude for, and to see it now, see her now take what I've learned in working with her and turning it towards our children and how she helps them and gives them responsibility and calls them up and carefully puts those burdens in their hands and on their shoulders because she experienced it with me and came to understand my love for her and my delight in her and my desire to see her whole, to see her more, not something different. Because so often early on it was the lie that I wanted her to become what I had in my mind of who she should be. And the only vision I had was for her to become more of who she is. It's not something different. It's not something altogether to accommodate my own desires, but to see her rise into the fullness of who she could be, of who God made her to be. And to not grasp on to that and try to mold it, but to tear away the things and offer up the responsibilities that would drive her towards that fullness as best as I'm able to navigate, because it's incredibly difficult. And it comes back to trusting God, especially in those moments, because I don't know if what I've decided to do is going to make it better or worse. But when the decision comes, it has to be made, and I have to stand with resolve for the sake of consistency and the sake of I guess consistency is the word. Just I don't even know. Yeah. I feel like I'm starting to wander off the point at this point, but I'm feeling the weight of that.
And what a journey. Thank you for sharing that, man. Oof.
But yeah, just coming back to what you were saying about, should I even resolve this? Because if I don't know the path that they're on, then I guess when it comes to your wife, you have that sufficient state of relationship, sufficient depth of relationship to start to really see the path that the person's on. And if you make the effort to understand what it is that God's doing in your life, and submitting yourself to that rather than coming up with your own machinations of how this should go, then you can truly play a part in the healing of the individual rather than just mitigating the suffering by addressing various symptoms of a deeper hurt, a deeper wound, a deeper damage. So.
I think there seems to me to be a bit of a line there that you're pointing to, Ken, or looking for. And I think that in the case with your wife there, what you were doing was realizing that the best thing for her was a mirror, a high quality mirror, even if she didn't enjoy the experience of seeing that at first or along the way. But you were committed to the purity of that reflection for her because you knew that that's what would help her on her journey. And I think, Ken, with what you were talking about there, the attempt to, smooth something over or rose-colored glasses that, soften a blow for someone can often be the choice to provide them a worse mirror, even though it feels like it's the right move. And there was something that, as you were speaking to me, that really came through about, are you trusting God with your actions? Because when you're a mirror, you're trusting God. You're trusting not just yourself and your commitment to your belief that this would work, but you're trusting that God would take care of that image reflection process the way that it should. But when you try and go out of your way to help someone, it can actually be from a place of not trusting God. Like you don't think God is going to help them or do what's right for them. So you're going to jump in and tweak that a little bit because that's going to make it better. It's going to make it nicer for you. But it's not a one-way street. It's not for you. If you treat everything like it's for you, you'll make those kind of mistakes. You know what I mean? Like you'll smudge people's mirrors. And at the end of the day, we're trying to get everybody to have a pure mirror. If you're being godly, right? So I think, I don't know, there's just something that stood out to me in the depths of both of the things you guys were talking about. It's, do you trust the mirror to do the work, or are you trying to smudge it to do the work?
That's a great way to put it.
Because when you were doing that, like you still owned that action, being the mirror. Like that was something you were doing or having that experience of doing it. But you're doing it with God. Whereas in the other case, I think you feel like you're doing it, but you're doing it without God. Does that make sense? Like I think the illusion that you will not be responsible or involved in the actions if you give it up to God is there in our conversation here, but I think also it's a false, because once you actually do it, you still feel, you know it's coming from somewhere else, but you feel a participant in those actions, right? And is that making sense to you guys?
Yeah.
But it really does feel like it's not going to be you if you give up control somewhere. But I think that's doesn't end up being the case.
Well, it kind of comes back to that idea of being whole, like becoming whole, wholly you. It's not that your alignment with Christ and your entrance into the space of the ideal dissolves the individual. It's going all the way back to that idea of the waveform. Aligning yourself with that ideal amplifies, because that wave draws up who you are more completely, and you remain unique in the way that you were created, but you can become more yourself. You become more whole. You become amplified by that ideal, and all that is good about how you were made is drawn up into its fullness.
Yeah. And the other side of it is the question of, and I think maybe it comes down to a distinction of tragedy and consequence. Because I aspire to be the sort of person that is generous to people in tragedy, generous in just generous. And and I don't know that I am that really. But I'm also struck by the recognition that I just don't know how to be generous. Because I don't know, because of this problem, because of this quandary. You know, I live in a town of, you know, one of the many towns on the West Coast that is, and many towns all over the place that are so plagued by homelessness. And you know, I work in medicine, so my experience of the addict problem and the wildly enabled obvious sufferers, let's call them, of homeless people. Like I've seen that so many times and interacted with it so many times that I don't know, there's something of it. Yeah, it just makes it makes me feel very confused. Because I see a world that's full of people very bothered by suffering and very much, and all these resources thrown at this cause and that cause and the next one. And since I brought up homelessness, right, like so much wringing of hands and so much money spent on the ending of homelessness, and it gets worse. And yeah, I guess it's just hard to, and maybe maybe it just comes down to specific versus universal, right? Like if you're trying to be universally generous, that'll never work. You can only be it in specific, you can only actually ever help particular people who are particularly suffering for particular tragedy. I don't know. Maybe it's our attempt to systematize. I'm just thinking out loud here.
I think to touch on the analogy of the mirror, I think there's something unpersoning about the process of trying to solve homelessness, because it would seem an unwillingness to be that highly polished mirror in the midst of the people trying to solve the problem and many of the people who are suffering in the midst of, you know, as a, like directly with the problem. And to be unwilling to reflect the truth, to say someone who's homeless is in a sense to unperson that, to make them less, because, oh, I can't give you the truth because you can't handle it, and certainly should do so in love, but there's something really gross about reducing that person to a problem to be solved rather than a whole individual who needs to, or at least an individual who needs to be made whole. It's not thus that they need somewhere to live, they need to be made whole. And then the issue of those trying to solve the problem, what it seems to be in the end is to try to make the problem disappear, which would be to make it so I don't see it anymore. Because if I can't see it, then it's not a problem. And when you
The
look
mirror
at,
analogy. Oh,
yes,
sorry.
go ahead.
Well, one of the things, I mean, I really like the notion of the mirror, And one of the things with it is that in order to be a mirror, you have to be able to look through the thing you're seeing and let it come back. I don't know if either of you are familiar with Ram Dass, but he's a guy who's had a big influence on me, and he talks about how he would perform wedding ceremonies for people, and before the ceremony, he'd have them come together, and he'd say, you know, I will, I only do, I will only perform marriages if there's genuine truth in the relationship. Because if you're not doing if you're not getting married as a way to get to God, I'm just not interested in it. I'm not going to be a part of that. And if there's not truth in the relationship, you're not doing it to get to God. And so he would have people stand and look at each other, and he'd say, okay, anything that comes to mind that you don't want to tell the other person, tell it to him. And he describes, and this was like a practice that he would do with people in general, you know, like people would come to talk to him, and he'd say, all right, anything that comes to your mind that you feel like you shouldn't tell me, tell me. And he said, you know, the person would say something to you, and you just have to sit there and watch what comes up. It'd be this whole thing, you know, the whole like somebody has some weird sexual thing or some whatever thing it is that we all have, and they bring it up, and you sort of watch it, you know, just watch it, you know, and blah, 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 process through it. And once it's gone, it's just all right, and that was the thing, right? And here we are.
Hmm.
And in order to do that, so this is something like what it means for Jesus to suffer for all the sins of the world, and why we all exist despite ourselves. And it connects to that idea in Dostoevsky, in the Brothers Karamazov, that in order to be truly saved, one has to make himself responsible for the sufferings of the whole world. And I think it's something like, in order to really be a mirror and become a genuine pure conduit, you have to be able to see everything that you ever see and experience everything you ever experience without judgment. You have to genuinely forgive everything that you ever come across. And in order to do that, you have to actually experience it. And so I think that's, you know, when you drive past the homeless person, you know, like I was sick last weekend, and on my way to work, I stopped at the convenience store to pick up Gatorade because I was dehydrated. And there was like a late 90s Subaru Outback, and it just packed to the brim with junk, and junk all over the roof. And there's a woman rummaging around in the back of the car, and there's stuff falling out, you know, and her pants are halfway down, and all, you know, it's just you can imagine the scene. And there's a guy sitting in the passenger. He can't hardly sit in the car because there's so much stuff in the car, like, but he has a little sort of edge of the seat, the back seat on the passenger side, and he's sort of slumped over like this, and there's a cigarette between his fingers, you know. And it's like, you can't imagine the despair of the modern homeless person better. And it's like, can you see that, and can you really see that and not be, can you go on the trip but not go on the trip?
Hmm.
You know, can you not be overcome by that suffering but also not turn away?
Yeah, because I think that's what they need, right? Like, they don't need someone to go around them and solve things. They need someone to solve things through them. And to me, that's showing them that delight. Like, I think that they've never had that if you're in that place, or so far gone that don't have it anymore. And what you're saying is that ability to look at someone who's suffering that much and hold their suffering
Yeah.
without,
And they don't even,
because it hurts
and
you
they
to,
yeah,
empathy. Mhm.
yeah, and they don't even have to know it, right? Like, I think that's one of the things too, is that, like, We always want to see results for the sorts of things we're doing.
like that. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's not nearly the way it works, I don't think. I think all of me has already been redeemed, despite my best efforts.
And a lot of times you're just planting seeds, and you'll never see what that grows to in that person's life. But I think
And maybe
the gardener isn't you. It goes a long way with that, because you only see a sliver of it, right?
yeah.
And in
Yeah.
your position, you're just, unfortunately, you're seeing the saddest sliver of so many people's lives.
Yeah.
That's a daunting kind of gauntlet to run through, because you're not getting the human resolution of these stories that you're encountering. And then that's got to be a hard part, just get the fragments in that sense, right?
I like to call that the masculine empathy of feeling the weight of potential you see in another.
Mm.
And you see, if you're really looking, like you said, you see the image of God on this person, even in the lowest state. And you know, because they're still alive, there's a pathway out. And you don't know that path. And you can't know. But in that moment, just trusting God to do something with the weight that you feel in seeing his image in such a state. And what big or little thing that you can do in that moment to move it just one little step down the path of finding its way back to its creator, finding that little image, finding its way back to the
Something you said there about the potential that really struck home for me, because I think that's what it is no matter how much someone is suffering, or the situation that they're in, how bad it is, if you can look at them and say that this too is infinite potential,
Mhm.
capable of unfolding the same way that you look at the person you admired most in the world. Like that's what it comes down to. It comes down to somehow treating humanity like God treats us. And I think there's a real challenge in that. There's a humility that comes from that task, because you know you're not up to it. But yet, like you said, you want it. You want to get to that place and stay in that place. But it's incredibly hard to hold the suffering of other people. I mean, we're talking about extreme examples, but I think if you just you walk down on a daily basis, you see people. That's all you see is people ignoring each other suffering.
Yeah.
A conversation like this, like how many people can you have a conversation like this with, right? Because we're sharing our suffering with each other. That's what's going on, and it's a beautiful thing. But because we don't do that much, and that's part of the damaged masculinity part for sure as well. Um, but there's so many people falling through the cracks of society these days, and it's because people aren't looking at them with the potential that they have.
Well, that's so much what it is, right? That when you feel held in your suffering, it breaks the chains of it.
Because you don't know anything bigger than this suffering. You've never seen strength greater than it, and someone shows you, like
Yeah.
your father showed you, right? There's something to that.
Yeah. Yeah.
and it comes back to that threshold above what suffering can destroy, like what it can tear down. And when you can get to that place above the threshold and understand what is eternal and what lasts and will be maintained, the from the bottom of the suffering to the top, it becomes such a small sliver of a thing, and yet in the midst of it, it can feel insurmountable. And
Yeah.
just really, like, how do you how do you point towards, how do you show them what it looks like from the outside? Or can you even? Is it just a matter of getting them one step closer to escaping that?
I think you can, like, in a practical sense, and like what you do, I think very much it's a one step kind of move, and you don't see it all play out and all that. But I really think there's something to this at a glance. You can tell whether way someone looks at you, if they're looking at your pain or not.
Mm,
And
yeah.
I had this experience with my grandmother who passed. It was during COVID, so there was masks and the hospital had to be, and you know, it's just made it a little less personal at the time, right? Because first of all, your memory's not that good when you're that old, and there's people in the room with masks on. It just, you know, it really changed the dynamic. But there was a moment, and you know where she was at with it was she knew she was going to die, but she didn't want to address it. That was just her place was like she admitted she was scared, but she didn't really want to like go into it. But even in that context, there was a moment where we made eye contact, and I knew that she knew I felt all of the pain that she was in. And
Mm,
again, my mask was covering everything else. So I just smiled with my eyes back through
oh,
that. And I could, like, her posture melted. Like, I don't even know. It's a crazy thing. You can do it with your eyes. I think that's what Jesus was doing. He's
yeah.
walking around melting people by seeing
Yes.
their pain on that level.
Yes. Yes.
And I think, like, it's like you do it with your being. That's your eyes, not your doing. Your being is what does that. The transcendental transfer that you can't hand that by giving someone even food on their table. That's just a different move, right?
It's the exact opposite of what Gabriel was describing with the homeless, the
Mm.
response to homelessness.
And it's almost like being seen, someone making the effort to see you truly.
And the funny thing is,
Peels
oh, no,
it,
sorry, go
it
ahead.
peels it peels open a space of, because you feel in the midst of suffering, you feel it, you know, making contact with every surface of your body. You're very much immersed in it, but somehow being seen just peels that all off 1 degree, and suddenly you can move a little. Like you said, she was able to relax in that space that you made for her by being seen by you. Is just how it feels thinking about that.
Yeah, I think it's
Yeah, that's
this is, I mean, this is a experience that is in my best moments when I'm doing medicine. This is like why I do medicine. Certainly, I don't have that many of my best moments, but I've had that sort of experience very much like what you described, Steve. Like I've been deeply blessed and fortunate to have that many times. And I've had people tell me that. Like I've had patients tell me, like, I don't know what that was, but somehow I feel more okay now. Like that sort of thing.
Mhm.
And so I know what it's like on that side. And it feels like when that happens, there's an intention. Like there's definitely an intention, but there's an absence of effort. There's just this sort of dropping away to being just, and this again, I like Ram Dass, I think, does the best job of describing this. Like very, you know, it's just you let go of all the context and all the stuff, and it's just, hey, are you here? I'm here. Yeah, well, far out. Like, how'd you get into that one? I don't know. Yeah, I'm just here. Um, but on the flip side of it, I've definitely experienced it from the other side too. And from the other side, it feels to me as if I am often trying to not be what I am. I'm trying to jump away from my experience. I'm trying to, I'm sort of clawing at the walls
Hmm.
of my own being. It's very much what anxiety is like for me. And or just suffering in general or whatever it is. And it's like someone comes in and sees you, like really sees you in your being and does that for you. It's like, whoa, they're okay with being here. Why am I not okay with being here?
Hmm.
Oh, maybe I can be okay with being here. It's like an encouragement, like gives you the courage to be, the
Hmm.
courage to be yourself. Like we lose the courage to be ourselves so easily. But we can give it to each other.
I really think this connects back to the stuff we were talking about last time too. It's like here, now, the present moment has more dimensionality than the future or the past. And I think what we're talking about is people who are stuck perpetually or almost perpetually in the future or the past, and they can't summon whatever it is they have to summon to produce the dimensionality of the present of actually being here. I think that realness, that like it does take more energy, but it is also effortless, which is strange. But people are flattening themselves because that's less taxing in a certain way, but it ends up being way, way more taxing. There's a funny energy efficiency thing there. But that's what it is, right? I can't handle this. And then someone else shows you, oh, I can handle it. And you go, oh, like that? Like
Yeah.
there's something like, just to simplify it, right? Like there's something there.
Yeah.
You can just hand people. You can actually not demand, but you can like through your presence kind of command people to the present moment. Um, Charisma is largely that, right?
It's like you can love people in such a way. Sometimes there is a certain amount that they have to be open to it, in my experience. But that's probably just because I'm not that good at it. But it's like you can love people enough that they want to be in the present moment more than they wanted to be wherever else they were. That's sort of like
And
feeling of delight.
yes, and I think it's still their choice too. Like just to say, like I think you probably have had experiences where people flash recognition in their eyes, and then the mask like cuts it
Yeah.
off. So like
Yeah.
they saw it, they know, but they
Oh
still
yeah.
so that I don't think you can control that necessarily, but
Yeah.
you can still give that glimpse, and then it's up to them if how they look at the mirror. But yeah.
I mean, if you're
That's in,
being fully yourself in that moment, you are the energy that excites them into that space of recognition, and they have the choice of letting that mask fall or shoving it back on real quick. But you have to part of I think truly loving the people around you is being as polished a mirror as you can be, being as much you as you can be, and honestly present in whatever it is that whatever circumstance you're in, and the energy of how you're taking on your own struggle is what kind of radiates out of you and hits those around you and opens up that recognition in others as well. And there's a real deep act of love in maintaining that and making an effort to fully be in that state as often as you can. But I think
so
too, sorry, go ahead.
well, I was gonna say it's been about 2.5 hours. I don't want us to sort of just like suddenly end. So I was thinking of just sort of like shifting to like a bit of more of a reflective mode for all of us for a little bit and just sort of like land the planes.
No, it's good.
If that feels good to you guys.
Yeah.
But I don't want to cut off if you had something, just one final thing there, Gabriel, if you want. I don't mean to cut you off or interrupt you.
No, that something that just came to mind. He was talking about, flattening it out and that somehow costing more energy than being open. And I think what happens when you flatten it out, there is no restoration. So though the cost may be less, technically, it's the lack of renewal. So the levels just continue to drop. And it's that opening up that allows the restoring of the energy. So it seems, like you said, effortless. It seems to cost less when you're open, though there's a greater exchange going on.
Yeah, the bandwidth is higher, but the sustain force is way lower.
Yeah. Whereas in that flat state, all you're doing is spending resources and going lower and lower and lower and lower. So that's that was, I think, the last thought, just what came to mind when you mentioned that. Now this,
Maybe this is sort of kind of summary for me of the conversation, what we talked about before. I was left as you were chatting there with the sense that, like, what a sense of responsibility we have, because what we're really saying is the filter that I put on my perception, I put on your perception through me. You're not going to see clarity through me except through how I allow it to myself. And realizing that, like, the relationship you have with yourself and the clarity of your own vision is the vision of God that you afford to everyone else.
Oh man, yeah.
That sharpens a lot of things for me and makes it, for me, that felt a very, like, it felt more of a communal effort in the way that's needed to for me to do that from the right place. Beautiful conversation.
Yeah.
and there's something that happens when you're as honest as you can be in love, that allows the other to stop running all their predictive algorithms of trying to figure out what it is you want from them. It's because if you're not communicating it clearly, like it's, say in the case of a marriage, if your spouse is not communicating clearly what they need from you, you're having to guess. And so you build all these little machines of prediction and measurement to try to decode what it is that this person needs. But when you are honest with someone and you are open, and again, as much as you can be in love, you can turn all those auxiliaries off and just be present in the conversation, knowing that you're getting the real data, you're getting the real feed, you're seeing the real person, and you're hearing as much as they're able to communicate it to you. You're hearing what they think and what they need and what they hope for and what they're looking for. And so, kind of coming back to that idea of energy, it doesn't cost so much to play these games of trying to guess at what the other person is thinking, what the other person needs, what the other person wants from you. And to offer that to someone is frightening and difficult, and you fear offending, and you're worried about upsetting them. But if you can let all that go and just be honest and love, suddenly the requirements of the cost of the energy requirements of the relationship just drop down, and there's so much more resource available to actually accomplish something.
Yeah. And I guess for me, that's probably the thing that I've noticed the most in this conversation is that I think all three of us have the ability to map well. And we have a lot of toys that we can play with and different things we can bring to bear, and that's fun. But I feel like what we did tonight was put that in service to cultivating actually doing the thing together.
Being the thing. Yes, being the thing.
Yeah, exactly. Being the thing. That's better.
It's
And
just,
I think
Sorry.
that was good. I think it was really helpful for me. Healing,
Agreed.
good.
Yeah, no,
Helpful in the sense that it will, I think it will carry me into the future in a better way. Good in that it is good in its own sense and not for something else. And healing because I think there's a part of me that's lost some of the initial joy and hope that I enjoyed in this space. Sorry,
Restoration
Gabriel.
is a good word for that. That's
No.
What's that?
just saying restoration is a great word for that. That's what we were
Yeah.
just chatting.
Yeah.
No, I resonate entirely with everything you just said. And no, this has been, I came in, it's funny, call it Providence. I've just in the past day or so, like run into sort of a dead end feeling. It's not that it will stay that way, but you come to those points where it's just like, where is this going? And it seems really appropriate that I hit that moment just before walking into this space, and instead of, and not really having something new necessarily to share, really opened me up to what just happened here now. And it's far beyond like what I could have imagined as far as where it could go, and really really went straight to the heart of the actual issue, which is just beautiful to see that happen. And so grateful, like, just for this conversation, because it really was exactly like where I'm at. And to have you guys just be in that same space, and for us to be even in the same phase of life, and even just to come together like we have, and all of this to land, is just a beautiful testament to the hand of God and the guidance of God, and the like, back to that delight in 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 drawing community together, and lifting each other up mutually, and that vulnerability of bros, like being able to really cut to the quick what it is that is the struggle that we're truly sitting in, and to be restored, to be energized, and to be reminded of what it is we're doing and why we're doing it, and what the greatest value, where the greatest value is. And so this has been absolutely lovely. Needed it.
Been great to play with you guys today.
Yeah.
Yeah. Playful wrestling.
Shout out to Rafe Kelly, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. Are you guys both on the East Coast?
Texas.
Yeah, he's Central, I'm Eastern time.
So it's early morning for you guys.
Yeah, I'm about to hit 1 o'clock,
Two. Yeah.
but I don't got work in the morning, so that's all right.
Yeah, good.
But no, just lovely. So good.
And Ken, whether you put it up or not, I think I don't know about Gabriel probably, but I would love to have this conversation just to reflect on as well myself, just because I think there's yeah, so many learnings that I'd like to dwell in the right way on and reflect on. There's more of me in this conversation than there is in real life, and I want to pull more of that through.
I'd honestly be happy for you to put it up if that's what you want to do. I wouldn't be offended either way, but
Yeah.
I just feel that this is something that's going on in the hearts of a lot of people in this corner. Because a lot of people, I mean, this corner is full of people like us who map and think and exist on the fringes and with a desire to find a way through this chaos and avoid the apparent impending destruction. But to be able to step away from that and then have context restored in an honest reminder coming out of three dudes who are just trying to tell the truth.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
hope it would encourage
Yeah.
others. So again,
Yeah.
up to you, but I just want you to know that I'd be happy either way.
Sounds good. Well, I may throw it up then.
I'm fine either way as well.
Yeah. All right, gentlemen. I could go all night, I think, but I think we all could, but
I'm secretly about to collapse for real. It's super late.
yeah. Yeah. I do have to work in the morning.
Uh,
It's more important.
Yeah.
Well,
All
thank
right.
you.
Yeah. Much love.
Yes.
This was wonderful.